Good day. Welcome to another biomechanical presentation by our Group 6. Today we'll be focusing on the biomechanics of the bench press. Our objectives today would be to demonstrate and analyze the movement patterns involved in the bench press. A demonstration would be done by my colleague, Mr. Burnett. We would also identify the joints and muscles involved in performing a proper bench press. And thirdly, we would be looking at some possible recommendations for improvement of form and technique when executing this exercise. So, the bench press, also known as the king of the upper body lifts, because of its many benefits, such as increasing upper body strength, strengthening of bones, and also building or boosting one's self-image.
The muscles involved in the bench press movements are the agonist. This is the pectoralis major, which causes horizontal adduction at the glenohumeral joint during concentric contraction. The synergist muscles, these are the short-head triceps, the anterior deltoids, and the coracobrachialis, which concentrically contract together with the agonist. However, these same muscles each centrically contract at the glenohumeral and elbow joint during the downward phase of the lowering of the bar towards the chest under control. Slight flexion of the glenohumeral joint is also done by the anterior deltoids. The stabilizers are the biceps brachii, the abdominals, the infraspinatus, the supraspinatus, the subscapularis, and the teres minor, which helps to stabilize the movement. For protraction of the scapulothoracic joint, the muscles involved, the muscle includes the striatus anterior, which increases the range of motion during the movement. For concentric contraction of the elbow extension, the muscles involved are the triceps brachii and the anterior and the anconeus.
When analyzing the bench press, the joints involved would be from the shoulder complex, the elbows, and the wrists. The major joints involved would be the glenohumeral joint, which is a diarthrotic spheroidal joint, also known as a synovial ball and socket joint. The other major joint would be the humero-ulnar joint, which is a diarthrotic ganglymus joint, and that is also known as a synovial hinge joint. So during the bench press, the concentric phase would see the glenohumeral joint abducting horizontally. This would lead to protraction at the scapulothoracic joint, and the acromioclavicular and sternoclavicular joints would also see protraction when the scapulothoracic joint protracts. So during the eccentric phase, however, the glenohumeral joint would adduct horizontally, which would lead to the retraction of the scapulothoracic joint, and the acromioclavicular and sternoclavicular joint would follow suit when the scapulothoracic joint retracts. The concentric phase of the bench press would also see the humero-ulnar joint extending, and the eccentric phase of the bench press would see the humero-ulnar joint flexing. You see flexion at the humero-ulnar joint. The radio-ulnar joint would permit pronation in the arm during the bench press.
One of the key joints in the bench press is the wrist joint, also known as the radiocarpal joint. And this is a ellipsoidal joint or condyloid joint where it allows for movement along two axes. Therefore, it is biaxial. That is allowing for flexion and extension as well as adduction and abduction. So when performing the bench press, the location of the wrist is critical to avoid injury to the joint. A straight wrist is the safest and most effective way to execute the bench press. Wrist wraps help to prevent extension on heavy pressing moments or movements, but it isn't the solution. Proper form when gripping the bar is what would prevent injuries. For the isometric contraction, it is evident when performing the bench press where the forearm muscles are actively held at a fixed length.
So we are doing the bench press. So firstly, the type of motion the bench press is, it's an angular motion because the shoulders and the elbows are the pivot areas when doing the bench press. Secondly, the bench press is done in the transverse plane. Transverse plane, longitudinal axis. The transverse plane is the plane that divides the body horizontally into cranial and caudinal. So the bench press is done in the transverse plane longitudinal axis because of shoulder adduction is being done in the bench press. Thirdly, we have the levers. The glenohumeral joint, which is one of the joints in the shoulder complex, and the humero-ulnar joint, which is also known as the elbow joint, are the two major joints used when doing the bench press. These two joints are considered class 3 levers because the effort force is between the effort force, which is the site of muscle attachment, is between the fulcrum or the axis of rotation, which is the joint, and the resistance force, which is the weight. Class 3 levers have a force disadvantage and a speed range advantage because the moment arm of effort is shorter than the moment arm of resistance. The moment arm of effort is the distance between the fulcrum and the effort force, and the moment arm of resistance is the distance between the fulcrum and the resistance force. This now causes a mechanical disadvantage because it will take more force to move the weight when doing the bench press. So example, if the weight when doing the bench press is 50 pounds, it will take more than 50 pounds of force in order to move that weight.
So in a bench press, torque takes place at the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. The momentum in this exercise is short. Reason for this is because of elbow flexion that assists the shoulder joint in generating more force in the exercise, and elbow flexion also reduces stress at the shoulder. So because of this, more resistance can be moved in this exercise. So comparing the bench press to the chest fly, the moment arm of the chest fly is longer. So if an individual were to do a 1 rep max of a bench press in a chest fly, there will be a lot of stress at the shoulder joint. You can move more weight when the elbow is bent and the arm is in horizontal adduction as compared to where the elbow is not bent in the chest fly.
When analyzing any exercise, we must know the purpose of the exercise, the body position, and the movement pattern associated with the exercise. The purpose of this bench press is to increase the size of the pectoralis major so that Batman can walk on Martha's Beach bareback. Prior to engaging in the bench press, the performer should ensure that the center of the bar is directly in line with the center of the bench. He should also know where his grip would be. The grip would be at a point when in the downward phase, where the humerus is in line with the body, that the wrist is directly over the elbow. Body position. The performer should lie back on the bench and ensure that his body is symmetrically aligned with the bench. His feet should be placed flat and firm on the ground to ensure maximum stability and force production during the movement. His butt and upper back will be pressed against the bench, and there will be a normal curve, there will be a resultant normal curve in the thoracic region of the spine. His shoulder blades or his scapula will be retracted and depressed to prevent an anterior humeral tint, which can cause damage to the glenohumeral joint. When in the downward phase, the bar will come in line with the nipple line, and his humerus will be abducted at approximately 75 degrees when in the downward phase to reduce the likelihood of a shoulder injury. In the upward phase, the arm will extend all the way up until the bar is in line with the shoulders. Analysis of this movement revealed a number of stuff. Firstly, it revealed the force-velocity relationship. The movement seemed a bit fast, which showed that the resistance was not too heavy for the performer. We also observed an uneven movement where the right hand, the right side of the bar, was higher than the left side in the up and downward phase of the movement. This could be as a result of a number of assumptions. Firstly, we assume that the position of the torso was uneven on the bench. Secondly, we assume that there was an uneven grip where the right hand was closer to the center of the bar than the left hand. We also assume that the position of the bar was uneven on the rack before the bar was lifted. We assumed also that there was scapular winging on the right side, where the right scapula protracted more than the left scapula. There were also assumption of a possible muscular imbalance or a lack of mobility on the left shoulder. Another error observed was in the slow motion video. We observed that the torso was twisting, and in the lateral view, the entire body was shaking during the movement, which revealed a lot of instability during the exercise.
So the first possible solution as it relates to an uneven bench press would be the positioning of your torso. So prior to taking on the load, it is very important that you lay back and ensure that your torso is and remains symmetrical to that of the bench, meaning that it should not stray to the left or to the right, not only prior to taking the weight but also during the exercise as well. Now, as it relates to scapular winging, which basically is the sliding of the scapula when completing benching, it is, however, notably more excessive on one side than that of the other, right? So, what you can do is prior to taking the load, you can retract and depress the scapula before taking the load. However, if the individual is having issues with retraction and depression due to weak rhomboids or possibly lower traps, the person can do strengthening exercises, one of which could be seated rows to strengthen the muscle. Another solution for an uneven bench press would be that of the placements of the weights prior to completing the exercise. So for example, if the weight was stacked on the rack unevenly, your body will then align according to the weights, and this of course will not only just displace the weight but your hands, your grip, and your body as well. So ensuring that the weight is equally placed on the rack prior to exercise would also be another solution to ensure that an uneven bench press does not occur. As it relates to a muscular imbalance or a lack of mobility on one side, you can resort or refer to questioning. So firstly, you can ask the individual if in fact he is experiencing muscular fatigue on one side of his body. Now, if this is in fact the case, what you can do is refer the clients or the individual to use the dumbbells. This way they would be able to choose a resistance level that they are able to maintain while completing the fixed set of reps. Alright, now if this is not the case and it's you assume that there is a lack of mobility, you can once again inquire and ask the individual if they did engage in a warm-up. Now, if this is not the case, specifically for the second set, you ensure that the individual is warmed up properly before attempting to lift the weights. It relates to having an uneven grip. This one is quite easy. It is just to ensure that the distance between the both ends or the grip distance between the grip is maintained throughout the exercise. Failure to do so, the weight would of course be displaced and could hinder the effectiveness of the exercise as seen from in the video.
These are the possible injuries you can get while performing a bench press. You have rotator cuff injury. The subscapularis and the interspinatus are the most often used stabilizers for bench press. If you have bad positioning or overload of the joints or even weak agonist muscles, it will be easy to get a rotator cuff injury. Next you can get a fractured acromioclavicular joint. If you have repeated locking out of the weights over your body, causing impact forces on the joint it will become easier to get a fracture on the joint. Next we have subluxation or dislocation of the glenohumeral joint. This can happen if the elbow is dropped lower than the body in an uncontrollable way. Then you have subluxation and dislocation of the sternoclavicular joint. There's a muscular imbalance around the shoulder, which causes the shoulder to get dislocated during the bench press. The sternoclavicular joint is also one of the hardest joints in the shoulder to get dislocated. Next you have shoulder impingement. Shoulder impingement can occur from an improper form or overuse of the rotator cuff tendons.